I never imagined I would spend my 67th birthday sitting in a lawyer's office wearing the same black dress I'd worn to my husband's funeral 3 weeks earlier. The smell of coffee and old paper filled the room as I waited for the man who had handled our family's affairs for decades to read the will. Beside me sat my son, Ethan Porter, immaculately dressed, tapping on his phone as if this were just another business meeting. He hadn't shed a single tear at his father's service. My husband, David Porter, had been a mining engineer his whole life, a quiet, brilliant man who built everything we had from nothing. When he died suddenly from a heart attack, I thought grief would bring us together. Instead, it built a wall I could not climb. "Mrs. Porter, Mr. Porter," said Mr. Reeves, our attorney, clearing his throat, "your husband's will is straightforward, but includes a few specific instructions." His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. That tremor should have warned me. He began reading aloud. "To my son, Ethan Porter, I leave the penthouse residence in Salt Lake City and all company shares registered in my name." Ethan's lips curved with satisfaction. Then came the line that changed everything. "To my beloved wife, Helen Porter, I leave the property located at 21 Red Canyon Road, including all its contents." I blinked, uncertain I'd heard right. Red Canyon Road? That was an abandoned mining site out near Moab, miles of red desert and silence. A shack. Mr. Reeves continued, "Mr. Porter stated explicitly that this bequest be honored in full." Ethan chuckled softly, the sound sharp as glass. "A shack in the desert? That's sentimental. Mom, I guess Dad wanted you to have a little getaway." I said nothing. I couldn't. My hands felt cold, my chest tight. When we left the office, Ethan placed a rehearsed hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll help you figure things out. Maybe we can sell that old land and get you something comfortable." Hours later, as the city lights blurred through the car window, he pulled up in front of my apartment, the one I'd lived in since before we could afford the penthouse. He lifted my suitcase from the trunk. "You'll be fine here until you decide what to do." His tone was smooth, but his eyes were already elsewhere, calculating. "I thought the penthouse," I began. He interrupted. "The penthouse is mine now. Dad made that clear. I'm moving in next week." My throat tightened. "Ethan, I have nowhere to go." He shrugged. "You have that desert shack, don't you? 21 Red Canyon Road? Who knows? Maybe you'll find buried treasure." He laughed lightly, turned, and walked back to his car. That night, I drove south toward the canyon, the highway empty and endless beneath a bruised sky. When I arrived, the shack stood alone under the moonlight, weather-beaten and silent. My headlights cut through the dust, revealing a warped door and broken windows. I unlocked the padlock with the key the lawyer had handed me, the metal cold in my shaking fingers. The hinges groaned as the door opened, and then, beneath the flicker of my flashlight, I saw it. Something glimmered under the wooden floorboards, half buried in the dirt, like a secret waiting decades to be found. My breath caught. Whatever David had done, whatever he had left behind, it wasn't just an old shack. It was a message, and I was about to learn what it meant. The wind outside howled through the canyon, carrying sand that hissed softly against the rusted tin walls. Inside, my flashlight beam cut through decades of dust. The shack was smaller than I expected. One main room, a rusted workbench, and shelves cluttered with old tools and coffee tins. But my eyes kept returning to that faint glimmer beneath the warped floorboards near the center. I set down my suitcase and knelt. The boards were nailed crudely, but after a few careful tugs, one came loose with a crack that echoed in the stillness. Beneath it lay a small metal box sealed with heavy clasps. My heart hammered as I lifted it out, its weight far greater than it looked. The initials D.P. were scratched into the lid. David Porter. My fingers trembled as I unlatched it. Inside were folded maps, several yellowed photographs, and a thick envelope tied with a piece of twine. The paper smelled faintly of motor oil in the desert. I unfolded the first page, his handwriting unmistakable. My dearest Helen, if you are reading this, it means my time ran out before I could explain what I've done. I'm sorry for the confusion this will cause, but I needed to protect what I discovered and protect you from what it could attract. I swallowed hard, reading every word through the blur of tears. 6 years ago, I found something beneath this land that no one was meant to find again, a deposit of lithium and rare minerals unlike anything I'd seen in my 40 years of work. The value could change our lives, but I knew what greed would do to our family, so I registered the claim under your maiden name and told everyone it was worthless. Ethan would never understand. He's too hungry for what can be bought and too blind to what can't. I stopped reading for a moment, my vision swimming. The David I'd known had been meticulous, honest, and deeply moral. He must have felt cornered to hide something this monumental from his own son. In the chest beneath the bench is another key. It will open the storage compartment outside where you'll find more evidence of what I left. Keep it safe, Helen. There are people who would destroy everything to own it. If anything happens to me, trust only the man named Liam Carson. He knows the truth. My breath caught at that name. I didn't know any Liam Carson. I turned the map over, tracing the faint red lines David had drawn, survey routes, mineral veins, and a small X marked behind the shack. The final photograph in the box showed him standing near the same spot, smiling despite the harsh desert sun. I replaced the letter carefully, my hands shaking. David's words circled in my mind like wind through the canyon. Trust only Liam Carson. The sound of gravel shifting outside made me freeze. I turned off the flashlight, holding my breath. Through the cracks in the wooden wall, faint headlights swept across the sand. A vehicle had stopped just beyond the ridge. My pulse quickened. Who would come here in the middle of the night? For 5 minutes, the engine idled, then shut off. Silence pressed against the walls, heavy and suffocating. I waited, barely daring to breathe, until finally footsteps crunched across the gravel, slow, deliberate, circling the shack. I clutched the flashlight like a weapon, the beam shaking in my grip. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound stopped. The wind rose again, swallowing everything in its whisper. But the dread didn't fade. Someone knew I was here, and whoever they were, they hadn't come for the view. The morning light in the desert has a way of exposing everything. No shadows to hide in, no secrets left covered. I barely slept that night, replaying the sound of those footsteps outside the shack. When dawn finally broke, the air was cold and sharp, the horizon painted in gold. I stepped outside, half expecting to see tire tracks in the sand, but the ground looked untouched, as if the desert itself had erased the evidence. That's when I saw the dust trail. A silver pickup was crawling up the narrow dirt path toward the shack. My first instinct was to run back inside and lock the door, but something made me stay. The truck stopped a few yards away, and a man climbed out. Broad-shouldered, weathered face, sunburned skin, and eyes that studied me with a strange mixture of caution and familiarity. "Mrs. Porter?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I hesitated. "Who are you?" "My name's Liam Carson," he said, removing his hat. "I worked with your husband years ago. I was supposed to come sooner, but when I heard about his death, I wasn't sure if you'd want me here." The name sent a chill through me. Trust only Liam Carson. "I found your name in a letter," I said carefully. "He mentioned something he discovered, something dangerous." Liam exhaled, eyes drifting toward the canyon ridge. "Then it's time you know what he meant." He stepped closer, holding out a sealed envelope, old with my husband's handwriting on it. "David gave me this before he died, told me to deliver it to you if anything happened." I took it, my hands trembling. Inside was a notarized document, a legal claim to the Red Canyon mineral rights registered under my maiden name, Helen Rohr. Attached was a coded ownership certificate linked to a private trust in Switzerland. My stomach tightened. "This means I own the entire deposit," Liam finished quietly. "And from what I remember, it's worth hundreds of millions, maybe more now with lithium prices the way they are." I felt dizzy. Why didn't he tell me? He didn't trust the company he worked for. They found out about his surveys, tried to buy him out, then threatened to expose him for violating confidentiality agreements. When he refused, they cut him off completely. I stared at the map David had drawn, the faint red lines now blazing with meaning. He was trying to protect us. Liam nodded. "And you're still in danger. Last month, I caught a man following me in Moab, said he was from the Department of Land Management, but his badge was fake. Whoever they are, they've been watching this place for months." I felt the ground shift beneath me, not physically, but in the deep, unsettling way when everything you thought was safe suddenly fractured. "So what do I do now?" I whispered. Liam's gaze hardened. "You hold on to that deed like your life depends on it, because it just might." The wind picked up again, scattering sand across the cracked ground. For the first time, I felt that the desert wasn't empty, it was alive, listening, and somewhere beyond those red cliffs, someone else was listening too. 2 days passed after Liam's visit, but I couldn't shake the feeling that every gust of wind carried eyes. The desert that once felt sacred now pulsed with invisible danger. Liam had driven to Moab to verify documents and promised to return the next morning. I spent the night reading David's letter again and again, memorizing every word as if he could protect me. By sunrise, I heard another engine in the distance, but it wasn't Liam's pickup. This one roared, powerful and impatient. Dust plumed behind it like a storm. A black SUV rolled up the path, its glossy surface painfully out of place in the desolation. Ethan stepped out, wearing designer sunglasses and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom," he said coolly, "you've been hard to reach." I stood at the doorway, shielding my eyes. "What are you doing here?" He looked around, wrinkling his nose. "So, this is it? The grand inheritance? Dad's famous desert hideout? I drove all the way down, expecting at least a view worth posting." I said nothing. He wasn't here out of concern. He was hunting. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "A friend of mine in Salt Lake mentioned that the Red Canyon property is sitting on valuable ground. Something about old mineral rights. Care to explain?" My pulse quickened. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter," he said, brushing dust from his sleeve. "What matters is you can't handle this alone. I have the resources to develop it, turn it into something big. We could be rich, Mom." "We already were," I said softly, and look what it did to us." His smile faltered. "Don't start with the guilt talk. You have no idea how business works. Dad left me everything because I know how to use it." "Or exploit it," I murmured. His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met his stare, steady now. "It means he didn't trust you. He left me this land for a reason. Maybe he wanted to see what kind of man his son would become." That hit him like a slap, his jaw tightening, the mask cracking. "You think he loved you more? He used you, Mom, just like he used me. He made you his cover, hid everything under your name so he could dodge the law." "That's not true," I said, though part of me felt the sting of uncertainty. Ethan stepped inside the shack, his expensive shoes crunching against the dust. "You don't even realize what you're sitting on. This land could be worth a fortune. You're going to hand me every document you have, or I'll find them myself." I blocked his way. "You'll find nothing here but your father's truth." His voice dropped low and dangerous. "I'll make sure you regret keeping secrets from me." He brushed past, knocking over a lantern as he left. The door slammed, the shack trembling in his wake. A moment later, I heard metal scrape, his SUV door opening, then a roar of the engine. But instead of driving away, it stopped abruptly, followed by the unmistakable hiss of air escaping from his tires. Ethan cursed loudly. I peeked through the cracked window. Both rear tires were flat, slashed clean through. He spun around, scanning the desert. "Who did this?" The wind carried his voice away, but my heart sank. I hadn't done it. Liam wasn't back yet, which meant someone else was out there watching both of us. I felt the blood drain from my face. David's warning echoed in my mind. There are people who would destroy everything to own it, and now they knew exactly where to find me. That night, the desert was so quiet it felt as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Ethan had left on foot after cursing into the darkness, vowing to return with real lawyers. His SUV sat useless in the sand, tires shredded like paper. I locked the shack door and sat in the corner, every nerve alert to the slightest sound outside. Just before dawn, I heard the low rumble of an engine. My heart leapt, then eased when I saw Liam's silver pickup pulling in. He stepped out looking exhausted but focused. "Your son's car?" he asked, nodding toward the SUV. He came uninvited, left even angrier than he arrived. Liam frowned, scanning the tracks around the shack. Someone else was here too. These footprints, there were 3, not 2. A chill ran through me. Then they're watching both of us. He met my eyes. "Then let's find what your husband wanted us to find before they do." Inside, we followed David's letter again. It mentioned a second key hidden in the chest beneath the bench. I knelt beside the old workbench, tugged at the heavy wooden chest, and there, under a layer of tools, was a tiny brass key. My fingers shook as I held it up. "There's a hatch under here," Liam said, tapping his boot on the floor. He found a seam hidden beneath the dust, then pried up the wooden planks to reveal a narrow metal door. The key fit perfectly. The lock clicked. We pulled the hatch open, revealing a steep ladder leading into darkness. The air that rose from below was cool and metallic, tinged with oil and time. We climbed down carefully, flashlights cutting through the dark. The tunnel walls were reinforced with steel beams, surprisingly sturdy. At the bottom was a vault door marked with faint initials, D.P. Liam took a deep breath and turned the wheel. The hinges groaned open. Inside, The light bounced off metal shelves filled with geological samples, sealed containers, and binders labeled Project Red Vein. On the far table sat a monitor, dusty but intact, and beside it, a flash drive labeled For Helen. I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, showing David's face, tired, older, but unmistakably alive with conviction. "If you're watching this, Helen, I couldn't tell you everything in person," he said, his voice trembling. "I found proof that the company falsified safety reports. They poisoned groundwater near Red Canyon to cut costs. When I threatened to expose them, they came after me. I built this vault to keep the evidence safe." He paused, eyes heavy with sorrow. "I couldn't protect myself, but I can protect you. Everything here, the data, the ownership claims, legally makes you the guardian of this land. Don't sell it. Don't trust anyone from the company. They'll come for it, and for you." The video ended abruptly with the sound of tires on gravel, and then static. I sat frozen, tears streaking my face. David hadn't just hidden wealth, he'd hidden truth, the kind that could destroy powerful men. Liam placed a hand on my shoulder. "Now you see why they killed him." I nodded, gripping the flash drive. "Then we finish what he started." But as we climbed back toward the surface, I caught something glinting near the shack door through the cracks of the floorboards, a red laser dot dancing across the wall. Someone was outside, and they had found us. The red dot slid slowly across the wooden wall like a heartbeat of danger. My breath caught. Liam's eyes met mine, steady, sharp. Without a word, he reached up, switched off the flashlight, and motioned for silence. Outside, the wind had died completely. The desert was holding its breath again. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel. 3 sets, slow, calculated. Liam whispered, "Stay behind the cabinet." He slipped toward the hatch, his movements quiet, controlled. I crouched behind the old metal cabinet, clutching David's flash drive so tightly my fingers ached. A faint creak of the door hinges echoed. Then the lock snapped clean off. The shack door swung open. Moonlight spilled in. Shadows moved against the dust. A man's voice, a low drawl, cut through the dark. "Search everything. The old man hid it here." Liam waited until one of them stepped toward the bench, then swung a wrench from the shadows. The blow landed with a crack, and the man fell, groaning. Another shouted, firing a gun into the floorboards. The sound was deafening inside the small shack. "Run!" Liam shouted. I bolted toward the back door as wood splintered behind me. The cold air hit my lungs like ice. The desert stretched wide and silent, but I didn't stop. Liam was right behind me, gripping my arm as we stumbled toward the ridge where his truck was parked. "Get in," he barked. We dove inside. Bullets sparked against the fender as he gunned the engine, sand exploding behind the tires. The headlights carved a path through the night. My pulse thudded in my ears louder than the roar of the truck. "Who are they?" I gasped. Liam's jaw was set. "Hired men. Same company that went after your husband. They must have followed Ethan here." I turned to look back. 2 sets of headlights now followed us, closing fast. Liam veered sharply onto a narrow service road that wound between red cliffs. Rocks scraped against the tires as he turned off the headlights. "Hold on," he whispered. We coasted in darkness for what felt like eternity until the sound of engines faded. He pulled the truck into a narrow cave opening, half hidden by boulders. We waited, breathless. Only when silence returned did he speak again. "We can't go back to the shack. They'll torch it." A lump rose in my throat. Everything's there, the samples, the evidence. Liam turned, holding up the flash drive. Not everything. Tears burned my eyes. David's face on that old recording flashed in my mind. He'd predicted this moment. Liam handed me a satellite phone. There's someone we can trust, a journalist named Clara Dawson. She worked with your husband years ago. He told her everything but made her promise to stay quiet unless this happened. I wiped my tears, steadying my breath. Then we find her. By sunrise, we reached Moab. Liam parked behind a diner near Main Street where a woman with gray streaked hair and sharp eyes waited with a thermos in hand. She smiled sadly when she saw me. "Helen Porter," she said softly. "David warned me this day might come." In that moment, I realized the war my husband had fought in silence wasn't over. It had just begun, and now I was at the center of it. Clara's small office sat above the diner, filled with stacks of old newspapers and the faint scent of ink and coffee. Her walls were covered with maps and pinned documents. David's handwriting appeared on several of them. She wasn't exaggerating when she said, "Your husband tried to fight this the right way." She connected Liam's flash drive to her laptop. The files loaded slowly. Hundreds of pages of reports, video logs, satellite maps, and correspondence between David and corporate executives. Clara's eyes widened. "This isn't just about minerals, Helen. This is proof of an environmental crime. They dumped toxic wastewater into aquifers beneath the Navajo lands. If this gets out, they'll face federal charges." My hands shook as I scrolled through the evidence. He died trying to protect people, and they silenced him. Clara nodded. "We'll make sure the truth reaches the surface, but we need bait. Something that draws them out in the open." Liam leaned forward. "A public announcement. Make it look like Helen's ready to sell the property." Clara's lips curved slightly. "Good. They'll come crawling, and when they do, we'll already have the FBI listening." We spent the rest of the night preparing a fake listing for the Red Canyon property. Clara posted it on an industrial land registry using a false email tied to a dummy account. Within 6 hours, the inbox flooded. Most were from shell companies, but one message stood out. Subject: private offer, urgent. Sender: North Star Holdings. Liam's jaw tightened. That's them. But what truly froze me was the next email from Ethan Porter. Message: "We need to talk. Don't sell anything until I see you." He arrived the next day, pale, eyes hollow, not the arrogant son who'd once laughed at my inheritance, but a man unraveling. "Mom," he said quietly, "they came to see me." I felt my stomach drop. "Who?" "The people from North Star. They said Dad had stolen data from the company, that you're in possession of classified property. They offered me money to convince you to sell the land to them, $10 million up front." Liam's jaw hardened. "You didn't take it, did you?" Ethan's hands trembled. "At first, I thought they were bluffing. Then I realized they knew everything, our phone numbers, our addresses, even the funeral details. And last week, they showed me something, a recording from the night Dad died. He didn't just have a heart attack. They ran him off the road outside Cedar Ridge. I gave them access to his files months before he died. I didn't know what they'd do with it." My breath caught. "Ethan!" He broke down completely. "I killed him, Mom. I didn't mean to, but I gave them everything they needed. They said they just wanted his research. I didn't think." I wanted to scream, to strike him, to collapse, but all I did was whisper, "Then help me make it right." That night, under Clara's guidance, we arranged the final act. I would meet the company's negotiator at the shack, pretending to finalize the sale. The FBI would be hidden nearby, ready to move once the deal was offered. When the black SUV returned to Red Canyon, headlights cutting through the sand, I stood in front of the shack alone. The door opened, and the same man whose voice I'd heard that night stepped out, his expression cold, confident. "Mrs. Porter, I'm glad you reconsidered. Let's make this quick." I smiled faintly, my voice steady. "Oh, I agree. Quick and public." From the ridge above us, flashlights blazed to life, and a dozen agents stormed down the slope. "FBI, step away from her." The man froze as agents surrounded him. Clara emerged from a nearby vehicle, recorder in hand. Ethan stood behind her, tears streaming down his face. For the first time since David's death, the truth had finally stepped into the light. 6 months later, the Red Canyon was no longer silent. Where the poisoned stream once ran, teams of engineers worked beside environmental scientists, restoring what greed had nearly destroyed. The land that had been used for corruption now breathed again, clean air, clear water, and justice. The company's executives were indicted on charges of fraud, environmental damage, and conspiracy. The story ran nationwide. Widow exposes $300 million cover-up in Utah mining scandal. Clara's article became the headline that carried David's name back into honor. I stood on the ridge one afternoon, watching the workers below. The desert wind swept through my hair, warm and alive. Liam parked his truck beside me, stepping out with his usual quiet steadiness. "You did it, Helen," he said softly. "No," I replied, smiling faintly. "David did. He just used me as his voice." He nodded towards a small group near the creek. Ethan was there, sleeves rolled up, hauling crates with the volunteers. Months ago, I never thought I could look at him without feeling rage. Now, all I saw was a man trying to rebuild something inside and out. He had turned himself in, given full testimony, and helped track the company's hidden funds. The court spared him prison in exchange for cooperation. Since then, he'd been working every day with the cleanup teams, unpaid. It was the first honest work he'd done in years. When he saw me on the ridge, he waved hesitantly. I waved back. The past couldn't be undone, but redemption, like the desert after rain, was slow and real. That evening, I returned to the cottage David had designed years before. The sunset spilled across the canyon like molten gold. I opened the final envelope Clara had given me, David's last note found in the company's archives. "If truth costs everything, pay it. If love demands silence, speak anyway. What matters isn't what we leave behind, but what we restore." I folded the letter against my chest and looked out at the land that at once felt like exile. Now it felt like home, because truth had found its place again.